The storms on Kareth never truly stopped, they just changed color. Tonight, they burned rust red, streaked with silver dust that hissed against metal. Jonas Reed trudged through the storm with a half-empty flask and a head full of noise. The outpost behind him pulsed with faint neon, the last civilized light for 1,000 kilometers, and his ship loomed ahead, buried in sand like a corpse half refused by the desert. He muttered curses as he stumbled, one hand dragging across the hull of the Aster Veil, his other gripping the bottle like a lifeline. The alcohol was the only thing that still made sense in a galaxy gone mad. A flicker of movement in the storm caught his eye. At first, he thought it was one of the holographic mirages that sometimes haunted the wastes, projections from broken beacons or his own imagination. But this shadow had weight. It walked upright, tall and deliberate, the dust parting around it as though afraid to touch. Jonas blinked hard, shielding his eyes, his pulse quickening in the drunken haze. When lightning cracked overhead, he saw her clearly for the first time, a figure with metallic skin that shimmered like molten bronze, eyes that burned gold, and vast folded wings glistening under layers of ash. He took a step back. What the hell? The figure tilted her head. Her voice carried even through the storm, low and resonant, like the echo of thunder trapped in a cavern. You shouldn't be out here, human. Jonas laughed hoarsely. Neither should you. The ground tilted beneath him and he went down on one knee, the world blurring into streaks of copper light. The flask slipped from his fingers, spilling its contents into the dust. He looked up again, expecting her to vanish with the next gust, but she was closer now, kneeling beside him. Her touch was warm, not like fire but like the steady hum of a reactor core. The scent of ozone and burnt metal clung to her. Through half-lidded eyes, he saw her wings unfold for a heartbeat, massive, iridescent, ancient, and then close again. You bleed too easily, she murmured, brushing grit from his cheek. Your kind always does. Jonas tried to speak, but the storm drowned his words. A dim light flared behind his eyelids, the kind that comes before unconsciousness or transcendence. The last thing he felt was the sensation of being lifted, his body weightless in strong, careful arms that radiated heat through his soaked jacket. When he awoke, the world was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. The ceiling above him was familiar, the dull plating of the Aster Veil. Systems were active. He turned his head and saw her sitting across from him, wings folded, repairing a power conduit with hands that glowed faintly from within. Jonas pushed himself upright, groaning. You, what are you? She looked at him, eyes reflecting the pale cabin lights like liquid gold. Once, I was called Sarah then, she said quietly. Now, I am just what's left after the fire. Outside, the storm howled against the hull. Inside, the ship felt alive again, humming with new power that smelled faintly of smoke and flame. Jonas stared at the dragon woman who had carried him from the storm and wondered, not for the last time, whether she had saved him, or simply claimed him. The ship's lights flickered in uneven rhythm, like a dying heartbeat trying to remember its purpose. Jonas sat on the edge of the bunk, rubbing his temples as the dull ache of sobriety crept in. The air smelled of burnt plasma and something faintly organic, like singed feathers and ozone. Across the cabin, Sarah then crouched beside an open panel, her long fingers tracing circuits with precision no human could match. When she moved, small motes of light shimmered beneath her skin, as though something alive pulsed inside her veins. He wanted to ask a dozen questions, but the words tangled in his throat. You fixed the power grid, he said finally. Her golden eyes lifted. Partially. Your reactor's core is fractured. You've been running on auxiliary reserves. I restored them. Right. You just, what, breathed fire into it. Her expression didn't change, but a faint curl of smoke rose from her fingertips. Something like that. Jonas leaned back against the wall, watching her work. There was a rhythm to her movements, almost ritualistic, careful, reverent, as though she wasn't repairing a ship but performing a memory. He noticed the torn fabric around her shoulders, the faint scorched marks on her wings, and the way she winced when she reached too far. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "I've been worse." "Then you should rest." "So should you, human mechanic." He smiled faintly. "You even know what that means." "I know what you are," she replied. "A builder. One who makes broken things move again. Though you seem to have forgotten how." The word stung more than he expected. "Yeah," he muttered. "Forgotten's one way to put it." The silence between them thickened, filled only by the hum of machinery and the distant growl of storms beyond the hull. Sarah then moved to the viewport, looking out at the swirling red landscape. Her reflection shimmered against the glass, faint embers tracing the curve of her face. "This world is sick," she said softly. "It eats everything that falls to it. Even the light." Jonas followed her gaze. "You talk like you've been here before." Her wings folded tighter. "Too many times." She turned then, studying him with an intensity that made his pulse skip. "Why do you drown yourself in poison?" He laughed without humor. "Because forgetting is easier than fixing." Her expression softened, and for a heartbeat, the glow beneath her skin dimmed. "Forgetting," she whispered, "is the first step to dying." Jonas exhaled slowly, the sound heavy in the confined space. "You sound like someone who's done both." "I have." The words hung there, simple and devastating. He looked at her differently after that, not as a hallucination or some cosmic punishment, but as something real and impossibly ancient. The dragon woman who had pulled him from the storm was not a savior. She was another broken survivor, fighting her own extinction. When she finally turned away from the window, her voice was low, almost tender. "Sleep now, Jonas Reed. Tomorrow, we rebuild your ship. And perhaps, something else." He wanted to ask what she meant, but her silhouette dissolved into the dim blue light of the cabin before he could find the courage. The hum of the engines grew steadier, carrying him into uneasy dreams where wings of light moved through endless dust. The next morning came as a dull gray shimmer through the viewport, the storm outside now distant thunder rolling across the dunes. Jonas stood beneath the reactor core, tools in hand, the smell of coolant thick in the air. Sarah then was beside him, her luminous eyes scanning the ship's systems through a holographic interface that bloomed like a flower of blue light around her. He had seen advanced tech before, but not like this. Her presence seemed to bend the machinery toward her will, wires responding as though they recognized her. He watched in silence as she placed her palm against the core housing. Energy rippled outward, thin lines of light crawling across the walls, illuminating every crack and imperfection. "The damage goes deeper than I thought," she murmured. "The reactor lattice is corrupted." "Yeah, no surprise there," Jonas said, crouching beside her. "It's been through a crash, a storm, and about 6 bad decisions." Her lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile. "Then we'll make a 7th." They worked together for hours, the air growing warm from the heat of the reactor. The quiet rhythm of tools and pulse energy filled the space, a strange harmony of human engineering and alien flame. Jonas began to notice patterns in how she moved, each adjustment made with careful precision, each gesture carrying meaning. He'd once seen master engineers work this way, like conductors shaping a song only they could hear. At one point, he caught her studying him, her expression unreadable. "You don't fear me," she said finally. "Should I?" "I have burned worlds," she replied softly. "Your kind wrote songs about what I am." He met her gaze. "And yet you fixed my ship." "Because you reminded me of something I had forgotten." He didn't ask what that was. Instead, he turned back to the reactor, tightening a line. "Well, maybe we can both remember a few things before this is over." When the power surged back through the conduits, the ship trembled slightly, light stabilizing to a steady glow. The aster veil felt alive again, breathing under their hands. Jonas smiled for the first time in months, a small, quiet thing. But the moment didn't last. The radar console emitted a sharp tone, flashing red. "Drones," he muttered, scanning the readout. "Federation pattern. 3 of them." Seraphon's wings twitched, tension rippling through her posture. "They hunt anomalies. They will detect me. Then we make them not." He moved quickly, adjusting the ship's signal dampeners. Sarah then followed his lead, weaving thin trails of energy around the core. The lights dimmed, the hull humming in a new frequency, an invisible cloak of distortion. Outside, the drones passed overhead, beams sweeping across the sand. One lingered too long near their position, its sensors pulsing white. Jonas's breath caught. Then, a low vibration filled the air as Sarah then extended her hand toward the viewport. Her eyes burned gold. The drone's light flickered, shorted out, and fell from the sky in silence. When it was over, she lowered her arm, trembling slightly. "That will not go unnoticed." Jonas exhaled. "Then we move fast." In the sudden quiet, only the soft hum of the reactor remained. It wasn't peace, but it was something close. 2 fugitives, 1 human, 1 dragon, forging survival out of the ashes of what they used to be. The ship shuddered as it rose through Kareth 4's atmosphere, the thrusters screaming against gravity's hold. Jonas gripped the flight controls, his knuckles pale, eyes flicking between failing gauges and the reflection of Seraphon's burning silhouette beside him. Her wings were partially unfurled, the air shimmering around her as if reality itself bent to her pulse. Every system on the Aster Veil was overloaded, yet somehow still functioning, her doing. He could feel it in the hum of the panels, the unnatural steadiness of the power flow. She wasn't just helping the ship, she was part of it now. "Pressure's climbing," he shouted above the alarms. "If the reactor breaches." "It won't," she interrupted, her voice vibrating with restrained fire. "Trust me." Jonas glanced at her, sweat beading on his forehead. "That's what people said before my last ship exploded." Her eyes met his, gold catching the pale blue of the control lights, and for a moment, the chaos faded. "This one won't." She placed her hand over the console. A surge of radiance rippled through the metal, sinking into the core. The temperature reading spiked, then stabilized, every warning light dimming in sequence until silence filled the cabin. Only the steady thrum of the engines remained. He sat back, breathless. "What did you do?" "Shared my fire," she said simply. But her face had gone pale, her breathing uneven. She trembled, her scales dimming from gold to silver. Jonas reached out, steadying her by the shoulder. "Hey. Easy." Her gaze drifted toward the viewport. Outside, the planet was shrinking below them, a rust-red wound fading into black. "They will know," she whispered. "The ones who hunt my kind. They will feel the echo of what I just did." "Let them," he said, his tone sharp but protective. "You're staying here until you're strong again. You'd keep me?" Her voice carried a note of disbelief. "Even after seeing what I am?" Jonas smirked faintly. "Lady, I've worked with plasma engines that tried harder to kill me. You're practically pleasant." A sound escaped her, half a laugh, half a sigh, and the tension between them shifted. Something unspoken lingered in the air, fragile and dangerous. Moments later, a sensor alert broke the quiet. A fleet signature blinked onto the screen, not Federation, not human. The waveform was serpentine, ancient, pulsing with life. Seraphon's expression hardened. "The hunters. How many?" "Enough to erase this system." Jonas looked out the viewport, where faint golden trails glimmered in the void, moving like predatory stars. He turned to her. "Then we don't stay in this system." He threw the ship into a hard vector, the stars streaking into lines as they accelerated toward the dark edge of the sector. Behind them, the stormed world of Kareth 4 vanished, replaced by a horizon filled with endless cold light. As the engines roared, Sarah then closed her eyes, her voice trembling. You should have left me. Jonas adjusted the controls and looked ahead. Yeah, maybe. But you're the only fire left in this galaxy worth saving. Outside, streaks of burning gold began to follow them, dragons of metal and flame crossing the stars in silence. The hunt had begun. They slipped through the fractures of deep space like fugitives through forgotten corridors. The Aster Veil moved silently between the debris fields of a collapsed planet, its hull cloaked by interference waves Sarah then had woven from her own energy. Outside, fragments of glass-like rock drifted, glowing faintly from radiation. Inside, the hum of the ship was uneven, half mechanical, half alive. Jonas had learned to recognize the change in the air when Sarah then used her fire. The temperature shifted, the lights dimmed, and the faint scent of iron and smoke filled the corridor. Tonight, that warmth was fading. He found her in the engine bay, kneeling before the reactor, her wings trembling. Crystalline lines had begun to spread along her arms, like frost, except it shimmered with starlight. You're burning out, he said quietly. She didn't look up. It's not the burn that kills us. It's the silence after. He crouched beside her, his hands stained with grease and fatigue. We can fix this. Whatever's happening to you, there has to be. There isn't. Her voice was soft, but resolute. Every time I share my fire, I lose part of myself. My kind were never meant to survive alone. Without the sanctum, I am fading. Jonas leaned back against the wall, staring at the flickering reactor lights. You saved my life. I can't just watch you die for it. You've already watched too many die, she said, her gaze piercing through him. I saw it in your memories when I carried you from the storm. He swallowed hard. Then you know why I can't lose another. For a moment, there was only the sound of the ship breathing between them. Then the proximity alarms began to wail. Red light pulsed across the room as the scanner displayed moving signatures, sleek, serpentine forms descending through the debris belt. Sarah then rose, her silhouette framed by the glow of the core. They've found us. Jonas sprinted to the bridge. Through the viewport, he saw them, metallic dragons gliding through the void, their bodies forged from living alloys, eyes like burning comets. Their movements were too fluid for machines. Tell me you can cloak us again, he said. Not without what's left of my fire, she replied, stepping beside him. He met her gaze. Then use it. She shook her head. If I do, there will be nothing left of me to save. Jonas exhaled sharply, his hands tightening on the controls. Then we run. The ship surged forward, engines howling as it cut through the wreckage. Plasma beams sliced past, scattering light across their hull. Sarah then closed her eyes, whispering in a language he couldn't understand, and the reactor responded, its core pulsing with a golden glow. The veil moved faster, reality stretching thin around them. When the first hunter closed in, Jonas diverted all power to the hyperdrive. Now. Sarah then opened her eyes, fire spilling from her palms as she touched the console. The stars outside folded inward, turning into a tunnel of burning light. The ship screamed through it, engines blazing. Behind them, a shockwave tore the debris field apart, carving a luminous scar across the void. Then silence. Jonas turned to her. She was slumped against the wall, motionless, her wings dim. For a moment, he thought she was gone, until he saw the faintest shimmer of light pulse beneath her skin, slow and fragile, like a star refusing to die. The silence after the jump was absolute. For a long time, Jonas sat motionless in the dim light of the bridge, listening to the quiet hum of the ship, steady but weaker, like the slow heartbeat of a creature near the end of its strength. Outside, a small, unnamed star burned with pale light, surrounded by the remnants of a forgotten system. No transmissions, no signals. They were alone. He stood and made his way to the medbay, the air thick with heat and smoke from overworked systems. Sarah then lay where he had placed her, her skin now almost translucent, scales refracting faint traces of light that pulsed faintly beneath. Her wings were half-folded, each movement fragile as glass. For hours, he worked to repair what he could, venting radiation, redirecting coolant, but the truth was simple, she wasn't failing because of the ship. She was failing because she had given too much. When he touched her hand, warmth still lingered there. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then clear. "You got us through," she whispered. "Barely," he said. "We're in some dead system. No comms, no pursuit. You did it." She smiled faintly. "Then I can rest." "No," he said quickly, shaking his head. "You're not finished. You said your kind could reignite if their fire found balance again. There's got to be a way, some core reaction, some." Her fingers brushed his wrist, silencing him. "The balance was never in the fire, Jonas. It was in the choice to share it." Her gaze softened, a warmth that cut through the cold steel around them. "You reminded me what it meant to give without fear. That is the rebirth I was denied." He didn't trust himself to speak. The hum of the ship deepened, the engines resonating with a soft rhythm, one he hadn't programmed. She felt it too. Her light grew stronger for a heartbeat, the golden glow spreading across the walls. "Your ship," she murmured. "It carries part of me now. My fire will live in its core. As long as you travel, I will burn." He swallowed hard. "Then I'll never stop moving." Her eyes closed, and her final breath was a shimmer of light that rose from her chest, drifting upward like dust suspended in a sunbeam. The glow merged with the ceiling, then spread through the hull, and the aster veil came alive with a soft, golden pulse. Jonas sat beside her for a long time after that, staring through the viewport at the silent star. Eventually, he rose, wiped the dust from his hands, and took the pilot's seat once more. The control panels flickered, unfamiliar symbols glowing faintly on the interface, patterns that looked almost like scales, or wings. He smiled through the ache in his chest. "All right, Sarah then," he murmured. "Let's see where your fire wants to go." Outside, the ship's engines ignited with a streak of living flame, neither mechanical nor magical, but something between. The aster veil rose from the ruins of silence and cut across the void, leaving behind a trail of light that shimmered like the memory of a dragon's wings.